What's up? Today we are catching some gnarly waves for Victims and Villains. My name is Josh, and today we are talking about The Surfer. Surfer is a psychological thriller that tells the story of Nicolas Cage returning to his hometown beach, only to face off against a surfer cult of bullies. This movie surprised me in ways that I am still trying to grasp. And I think specifically is it just doesn't seem like on paper Nicolas Cage versus bullies slash a cult wrapped around the idea of territory and surfing would necessarily work. But there's just something about this movie that inherently does. First off, I have to say that part of what really works here is Nicolas Cage, much like his other roles, whether they are done by big studios or small blockbusters like this. He just has this way that he just commits himself to the role, and there are so many moments within this that just get under my skin and made me cringe and drew me to the edge of my seat. But again, it's just the committed, transformative performance of Nicolas Cage, and I don't really care what people say. I think The Surfer is just another great example of how Nicolas Cage is just one of the most underappreciated actors working today. And I get it. I get that he's a meme. I get that people think that he is just kind of erratic. But again, you watch a movie performance like this, and you can't help but think, man, this guy just really just gives this transformative performance. And it's just so incredible. And I think what really helps elevate this movie past just this kind of ludicrous concept that this movie has is the facing off of him and Julian McMahon. I grew up in the era of Nip Tuck. It is, to this day, one of my favorite series, and he is an actor that I have been missing on the screen, and this movie was everything that I wanted him to be, and then some. McMahon just does an incredible job at this, in this role in and of himself, but to kind of see him face off against the erratic nature of Nicolas Cage, and just kind of being that cool, calm, collected Dr. Doom, Christian Troy that we know him to be, in just roles like that he does that are very similar to that, just is incredible. I loved the cat and mouse game that this presents. I love the way that this movie presents its narrative and the way that everything just kind of grows so naturally, and then just takes all of these turns that you just never see coming. That's not to say that all the turns feel completely unpredictable, because there are quite a few turns that definitely just feel like I saw that coming. This is probably going to be what it is. But I will say this is a movie that had me literally questioning reality in portions of it that I really surprised me. There are moments where I was like, am I envisioning this? Like, is this the twist? And then like that twist had a twist, and then that twist had a twist. And this movie just does twists very well. And the fact when you can make your viewer question their own sanity and reality, I think has the markings of an incredible psychological thriller. This movie made me feel all kinds of uncomfortable. The further into it got, there are definitely some uncomfortable moments that just you cringe at, but then there are just some uncomfortable moments that are just uncomfortable for the sake of uncomfortable. But it adds into that whole psychological thriller element that I think is really well done. Also, I'm really fascinated to see how this movie takes on cults, because it doesn't feel like a traditional, and I might be the only reviewer referring to this group as a cult, but it operates like a cult, and I'm gonna call it as such. If it quacks like a duck and it sounds like a duck, it's gotta be a duck. This movie has a way of being psychedelic without actually being psychedelic. Now, that's not to say that there aren't psychedelic sequences in here. Again, the psychedelics sequence in this and the way that it's shot, it made me feel very nauseous. And I think, again, that's just adding into the psychological nature and just how well this movie does psychological. I think one of my biggest complaints about this movie is that, as someone that grew up on X Games and someone that still has a fondness in their heart for extreme sports like skating and surfing, this movie doesn't necessarily have enough surfing for me. Like, there are sequences where you see people on boards and near surfboards, but they're either entering into the water, we cut away, or we've just cut away and we're coming out of the water. Like, it doesn't have enough of those elements in here that I would have liked it to, especially given how committed Cage has been in other roles that That's High Praise has covered over the years, and just kind of really finding out how committed to his craft is, especially for a single film. I would have loved to see Nicolas Cage shred some waves. Like, that seems like a very minor complaint to have, but I feel like if you're gonna call a movie The Surfer, there needs to be some sense of surfing in this movie. One thing I will say, going back to the psychedelic elements of this movie has just such a beautiful color palette. And I think there's an unspoken beauty about this that is kind of juxtaposed against some of the film's crazier elements. I really love how this film just also feels like it's a part nature film, the way that it is just encompasses different breeds of animals, as well as the same time just getting to see the natural beauty of Australia, I thought was breathtaking and really made this film feel like a really unique visual just treat. On top of that, you have these shades of red and green and purple that are just very dominant and just very very overpowering in some ways, in the best way possible. I'm not saying that as a negative. It is very gorgeous. This movie just has a very breathtaking element about it. I will say there are some moments within this movie that do feel like they do drag on, and when you have that cringe element as well as that psychological element, those elements that feel like it drags on really you feel those. And I came out of this movie is under 2 hours. I came out of this movie, and not only was I kind of floored by the entire experience, because this isn't just a movie you go and watch, this is a movie you experience. And I might be a little bit biased as a co-host of a Nicolas Cage podcast, but this movie feels like one you experience and you're engrossed in. And I think when you feel those moments that do drag, you really do feel them. And that's probably one of my other complaints about this movie, is just how its pacing can sometimes feel a little uneven throughout the movie. With that said, I'm ready to run this one through our Rorschach rating scale. Go ahead and give The Surfer a 3.5 out of 5. I think this movie, first and foremost, looks absolutely gorgeous. The way that it encompasses so many elements of this, like, almost nature film or documentary on nature, the way that it breathes through these beautiful color palettes and just showcasing the natural beauty of Australia, and how it's juxtaposed against these really tense, cringe, and just really well done psychological moments. And at its core, these performances from Nicolas Cage as well as Julian McMahon and their rivalry just really elevates this film to be a really unique experience. Emphasis on experience. The Surfer is now playing in theaters everywhere. If you guys have seen it, what did you think? Comment below and let me know. But let's talk about mental health, shall we? If you guys are new to our content, Mental Health Moment is where we will take a theme of mental health out of the film which we're reviewing, talk about it for a few moments in the hopes to deconstruct the stigma surrounding mental health. I think The Surfer does a great job at encompassing this fact of, and oftentimes borderline misconception of, bullies and bullying. I think oftentimes when we think of the subject of bullying, especially in media, we think of it as this almost middle and or high school, maybe even college element. But after you kind of get out into the real world, surely you don't have any bullying or people that are just rude or mean to you or just treat you really poorly. And I think this movie does a really great job at really showcasing the effects as an adult when you go through bullying. And I think also times more than that is you also kind of get to see with the McMahon and Cage character, you also get to see the lasting effects a relationship of bullying can actually have on a person well into their adulthood. And I think it's a common misconception that we need to normalize that in adulthood, we still feel bullying. We still go through people that treat us less than human just because they don't flat out like us or don't like the taste that we may have in certain types of media, what we do gravitate to, whether that is different fandoms, what we do for a living, etc. Because in the long run, bullying, whether you are bullied as a kid or as an adult, can have lasting effects that can actually affect your self-esteem, can affect your relationships with other people, romantic partners, as well as just who you look and feel like you are, your individual personality as well. So if you or someone you know is currently struggling with bullying and have also been tempted by suicide, depression, addiction, or self-mutilation, click the links in our show notes below. In our mental health resource library, we do have direct links and resources that are available for victims of bullying, as well as general information about resources for those struggling with mental health and suicide prevention. Once again, The Surfer is now playing in theaters everywhere. In the show notes below, you guys will also find, as I mentioned, our previous mental health resource library, but you guys will also find links to our social media, podcast network, more movie reviews like this, how to support us via Patreon and Paramount Plus, and that follow button. So until next time, remember, hang 10 and keep it classy.